He had a charming voice and was an artist like me. I sensed that we were maritally compatible. Once Agnetha had reached the top of the Swedish charts with Jag Varsakar, everything moved very quickly. After further success in Sweden, the record company decided to launch her in West Germany through a record company called Hansa Schallplatten. She had got good grades in languages at junior secondary school, including German, so there was no problem singing in that tongue. The producer was a young man who'd had some success with his own songs. He looked after her and was her safe haven in Berlin. Love seemed inevitable. Blonde, pretty 19-year-old, already a star in her own country, moves abroad for the first time and has her career helped along by a cute producer in the German record business. Engagement was just around the corner. Agnetha released 8 singles in German, but never had a breakthrough there. They weren't interested in releasing her compositions either, which disappointed her, of course. She thinks that Utan Dig would have gone down well, but they didn't take to the suggestion, so it wasn't a successful excursion. The engagement was broken off after barely a year. On her arrival back in Sweden, Agnetha received a letter from the television producer Carl Gimtel of Sveriges Radio in Malmö. He asked if she would like to take part in a Jules Sylvain gala on television, which he was calling Räkna de lyckliga stunderna blott, only count the happy moments. When she saw some of the participants listed, it gave her a shock. Sten Nilsson, Agneta Munter, Agnetha Fältskog, and Björn Ulvaeus. She had already met Björn during some People's Park tours. Once he was supposed to appear after her with the Hootenanny Singers. However, she arrived late and the Hootenanny Singers had to step into her spot. It really irritated Björn, so things at this stage were distinctly chilly between them. Björn had released his first solo single, which was called Raring, Darling. I thought he was cute, became interested and asked for a copy of his single. It came by return post. We fell deeply in love during a television recording on the West Coast in May 1969. Björn was warm and tender. I looked up to him. He was well-read and intelligent, very well informed and at home with most things. I wasn't. I had done nothing since leaving school to improve myself. I see that as a shortcoming. He had a charming voice and was an artist like me. I felt that we were maritally compatible, which is quite apparent in some of the pictures from that time. Benny and Frida met in 1970 on a radio show recording. As Benny and Björn were working as a duo, it wasn't long before their girlfriends met. The foursome soon began working together. Benny and Frida became engaged in August 1969, and a few months later we followed suit. We all went off to Cyprus and had a terrific engagement party. Björn and I had found a flat on Lilla Essingen. We moved in and began to look for the right church for our wedding. In April 1971, Björn, Benny and I formed a trio and set off on a tour of People's Parks, while Frida toured with Lasse Berghagen. There were many breaks for recording during that period. I made my 4th album, When a Beautiful Thought Becomes a Song, with Björn as producer. Before that, little Gerhard had worked on my first 2 albums, Agnetha Fältskog and Agnetha Fältskog Volume 2, at Metronome Studio. On the 3rd album, As I Am, which included my own song If Tears Were Made of Gold, I'd asked Björn to be co-producer along with Gerhard. That album included a duet with Björn called, significantly enough, This Is How Love Begins. At this point, all 4 of us thought it was time to give our first floor show together a try. We called it The Party People and began rehearsals. It was not a success, generally comprising of a thin spread of vapid jokes and other people's songs. The premiere, at Tradgarden restaurant in Gothenburg, saw a few scattered couples at tables in an otherwise empty auditorium. It could have meant a premature end for the budding ABBA quartet. Then we decided to take our show to Strand in Stockholm and started using Björn and Benny's Hej gamle man, Hello Old Man, from their album Lycka, Happiness, which also included Liselott, a song Björn and I had written the lyrics to. Hej gamle man became a showpiece in the Strand show. A song from Frida's album, 3/4 of an Hour From Now, lifted things too. Frida and I really pushed Hedge Gummelman, and it became a hit as soon as it came out. It was the first record with all four of us on it. The pieces of ABBA had begun to fall into place. After the show at Strand, it would be a while before we all worked together again, apart from doing backing vocals for each other. All of us were focusing on our individual careers. My solo career was at its peak. I had also got my first theatrical role as Mary Magdalene in the Swedish production of Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber's rock opera Jesus Christ Superstar. It had been a long-time dream of mine to act. Now I had my chance and didn't intend to let it pass me by. I delighted in being on stage, and it was a success from the start. I recorded the main song, I Don't Know How to Love Him, a quiet and sensitive song, and it became very popular. Frida was also on her way up at the time. She was marvelous on her first album, with Benny on piano and producing. Both Benny and Bjorn were actively supporting us in our careers. Benny had left the Hep Stars, and Bjorn's participation in the Hootenanny Singers was on the wane. Instead, they had begun a creative collaboration which would result in some of the pop world's most brilliant songs and lyrics, eventually true classics and multi-million sellers. They formed their own company, Union Songs, with Stickan Anderson. During the 60s and 70s, Stickan had made his name as a popular tunesmith and lyricist. Michael B. Tretow, engineer and gifted sound technician, joined the team, becoming responsible for recording. Stickan Anderson and Bengt Bernhag had started another company in 1963 called Polar Music. When Bengt tragically passed away in 1971, Bjorn and Benny began to work as Stickan's partners in the company. Bjorn and I continued to write lyrics together. Parade of the King's Guard and My Summer Holiday Country were played all over the country that year. During a tour of people's parks, we found the perfect place for our wedding, a romantic old church in the village of Verum in northern Skåne. We knew immediately that this was the place we'd dreamed of and searched for. Over 3,000 people had gathered outside to see the wedding of the year between Agnetha Fältskog and Björn Ulvaeus on the 6th of July, 1971. For many years, Agnetha had completely captivated Sweden's population. Björn had many of fans from his time with the Hootenanny Singers. He had also sung himself into Swedish hearts with his versions of the wonderful songs by Dan Andersson from the forests of Dalarna, amongst others I'm Waiting by My Charcoal Pile and Where the Birches Sough, and had enjoyed great success with his album Raring. The fans outside the church jostled to catch a glimpse of their idols. Press photographers laughed to get the best angles. When Agnetha arrived in an open landau drawn by a team of white horses, there was a great commotion. Her wedding dress was a dream in white, and in her long blonde hair she had a garland of white flowers. Her eyes shone, and photographers took countless snaps of the smiling bride. These adorned the covers of most of the country's weeklies within days. Here were all the ingredients for a romantic fairy tale wedding, as though designed for magazine readers. The guests inside the church didn't see that one of the horses was made nervous by the tumult, and happened to stamp on Agnetha's foot as she stepped down from the landau on her way into the church. It throbbed and hurt, but she put on a brave face. As she and Bjorn walked through the church doors, Benny struck up Felix Mendelssohn's Wedding March, followed by his own composition, Wedding. Little did he imagine then that later in life he would be compared to the great masters. The marriage service could begin.